Hi, I'm Alex Swain. This series explores the relationship we have with artificial intelligence, telling human stories of creative projects to understand the design process and highlight what we will need to protect in an ever more technological world. In this episode, I meet with Rob Northam, the Executive Creative Director at RGA. We explore emerging technologies, the blending of LLMs and web experiences, and how brands will have to adapt to agentic technologies to elevate their experiences for clients and customers in the future. Rob, hi, morning. Welcome to Design Futures.
Morning, Alex. Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
I'm really keen to sort of frame our conversation around the future of the internet and interaction design, experience design. And I wonder if we could just start with a brief introduction and how you would kind of frame yourself, how you would describe yourself in terms of the skills of an executive creative director, which is very broad, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not quite sure how I would describe myself today. Um, yeah, I studied print design originally. Of course, never ended up doing that, fell into digital, and now even that's evolved. So I think the main learnings, I guess, from my skill set would be the fact that it's just continuously changing, continuously based around learning. And my spine, I guess, from a kind of skill set perspective, would be design across visual design and experience design. Um, and I think the reason why I've been at RGA for so long and kind of why it resonates with me is that combination of creativity and systems. So I seem to be able to think within those kind of spaces. So you're going to have something that's creative, that's maybe strange or weird, that's out there, and then be able to think about how that can work in a system as well. So kind of combining those two elements together, which creates an interesting dichotomy between something that's new, that's different, it's a bit strange, and then how does that actually behave in a system? I don't know if that
Mm.
answers the question, but yeah, fundamentally,
Yeah.
the core merging into strategy and thinking through creativity and systems.
Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. I mean, it's a little bit of left and right side brain working together, isn't it? The duality of automation and systems, but then the unknown of creativity, that serendipity, the kind of just where do the references come from? Where do the ideas come from? They just evolve, don't they? They just come up. Okay, cool. So, and obviously in the last 6 months, I mean, the last couple of years have been crazy in terms of AI and new tools launching all the time. But really, in this year, it's been so far the year of agents. And I wondered what you've kind of observed from your clients so far in terms of, their awareness of agentic technology and, are they kind of using the tools to kind of bring um, ideas to you as part of the kind of briefing process. How really is the agentic um, sort of influencing any of your creative process or conversations with clients?
It's influencing it a lot, for sure. I think with all of our clients, there's a spectrum of understanding across the AI space. Obviously, kind of all the clients we work with are incredibly smart, but within their organizations, there are different states of change within AI. Some are kind of just adopting it, others are much more advanced. So that agentic question becomes something, depending on the maturity of the organization that you're talking to, if they're kind of willing to accept that or they can see the benefits. The work we did with G42 is an example of that. They are an AI company, so they came to us wanting an experience and a solution that was very much around that agentic generative interface. But I think it's also the mindset of the clients that we're talking to. Some are still thinking of AI just as a tool, which puts you more in a production mindset. So if you're thinking about how you can generate writing or imagery or use AI for research, that keeps you at a certain mindset where it's more about production. And then if you think beyond that, with the possibilities of what an agent can actually bring for you, it's about how your brain can then actually start to think or even act on your behalf. And it's the clients that understand that that get to, I think, the most interesting briefs for us, because it's a very different shift in a mindset, because it destroys almost everything that we have today. If you have a funnel and you're pushing our kind of audience through that funnel perfectly, you have an LLM agent, it doesn't need the funnel, right? It just goes straight between the customer and your brand, makes a decision about you in seconds. So all of our thinking we've had for the past few years, the ways we've actually done things, then becomes quite different and needs to change. So it's a really interesting time to be able to think through that. And I think a lot of the clients that we're working with, they are starting to get better at this more iterative approach that you have to have with this, because it's less about designing a perfect experience first and then that gets built. You're almost building the plane as you're flying it, because you're iterating between design and development. But the beauty of that is you can literally see how that agentic experience works. You can have that dialogue, that conversation, which is incredibly powerful, much more so than a Figma blueprint.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, the idea of mindset and being completely open and being able to pivot and change how you process a brief is really really important now for a designer. You know, at your level, a senior level, it's kind of being able to adapt to how an agentic process.
100%. If you think of the way we've designed previously, you would be creating design systems, you'd be creating templates, then you'd go into pages or flows, things like that. But if you're thinking a more agentic mindset, you're thinking about inputs and outputs. You're thinking about the variables that you have between that, and you have to let go of control a bit as well, because if you have outputs that could be almost limitless, you can't oversee every single one of them. You can't approve every single one of them. You can
Mm.
work at a system level and you can define the core principles that you need, design towards the edges of those outputs, and then trust the system or the AI that you've embedded to be able to actually generate what you need. So that's a fascinating mindset. It's this idea of coherence over consistency.
Okay, and of course, that's all very much kind of with the output of kind of creating something very visual, a visual kind of experience. Are you starting to think about sound and how new hardware, new technology, that, you know, there's kind of talk of new devices, wearables that wouldn't have a screen necessarily. And so are you starting as a studio to think about sound and how, sound interaction design is going to play a more important role than it does now?
True. Yes. We're starting to think about that. I'm not sure we have the answer for that yet. I can't give you kind of that. Uh, but you're right. The idea of wearables or more kind of ambient technologies that go beyond a screen are something that we're definitely thinking about. I'm literally writing an article on that now. Um, but it's fascinating because if you go beyond the interface, you have to start thinking about presence, which becomes really interesting. So Sam Altman and Johnny Ive are kind of working on their device, right? Which is going to be that ambient presence essentially. So if your agent has that context around your life or understanding what you're doing, where you are, why you're acting in a certain way, it's then able to adapt and change around you. That doesn't require a screen. But
Yeah.
it's a very interesting question. How do you design for something that doesn't have a screen, right? If you're thinking about an AR experience, you can't design a wireframe for that because it's spatial. So
Yeah.
companies like Leap or even Apple with their kind of Vision Pro have been thinking through these kind of spaces of designing for augmented reality. And I think, like you said, sound is a core part of that. I think that becomes increasingly useful. And it's also something that you would actually use, right? It's common for people to walk around with a pair of, headphones on that could
Mm.
augment your experience, make your life better, can tell you things. So I think there's definitely sleeper technology there, especially with like Apple's AirPods, things like that, or being able to
Yeah,
have a conversation with someone in a different language that gets instantly translated, played back to you. Incredibly powerful. But I think that would be
yeah,
the next wave future. I don't think we're quite there yet to go beyond the screen, but all of the interaction patterns that we have today are basically from like 50 years ago, right? They're from the industrial age, like a lever became a slider, right? Or
mm,
ways that we interact with everything on screen. It's from a different era. So we're moving into a space now where it's essentially a blank canvas, or if you can even call it a canvas, it's a blank space that we
yeah.
get to fly in, which is fascinating.
Um, and and I guess this is sort of going to raise questions around the power of brand, or how brand as a discipline kind of flexes to this new kind of future as well. Because if sound is more important, and um, yeah, the interaction with a virtual world and having AI as a companion through glasses or wearables, then how does a brand appear in a consistent way within these new experiences? It used to be kind of values or DNA, brand codes, which you can translate into visual ideas like colors, have a lot of semiotics and meaning, imagery, and copywriting. You can tailor a brand's purpose and values through design language. But as we move into this new space, it's going to be a challenge, isn't it? Do you Are you having conversations with brands at the moment about how they need to start changing their thinking, and how do you kind of brief them in terms of how to explore this internally?
Yeah, the role of brand is, I mean, brand's always been important, right? That's been at the core for ages, but it becomes increasingly important now because actually that determines how you show up in an experience, or how you should behave if you are an AI companion, something like that. I think the good thing about brand is that there already are like a lot of values that most companies have, or purpose or principles. They have their kind of guide, I guess, or their kind of brand DNA, like you would say, that helps to guide things. It's how we can codify that into behavioral logic that can then help to show, or help to inform how your brand shows up in those different spaces. The more simple ways to do that through things like visual language or kind of tone of voice, that's easier to translate. But it almost comes down to a feeling, and again, that sense of iteration, right? So if you've got a brand and they're behaving in a certain way through an experience and it doesn't feel quite right, there's no silver bullet that you just go, oh, I just changed this one little lever there, and then my brand behaves in a certain way. It's the human with that sense of taste that's kind of helping to guide that. And you're iterating, you're making those small decisions to get to a place where, okay, that feels like my brand now. It's behaving the way it should. It's got the right voice, it's got the right tone. And you know it when you feel it, right? You'll just be, yeah, that brand is behaving in the right way. It sounds right. That could even be just like the actual voice it's speaking with. And it's that human and machine interaction there, finding the best representation that you can agree on of what your brand is. But that all comes from your brand strategy, your values, your principles, what you will and won't say, essentially.
The behavioral science is going to be even more important in this sort of world of screens, no screens, virtual experiences, VR, or yeah, the internet has evolved over the last 25 years or so. It started off as a network of networks. We then had like mobile and the app store, and all these new industries, e-commerce. Where do you sort of see things moving then in the next couple of years? In not even the future really, it's like now. How are things changing? So you've been a designer designing websites and experiences for 20 plus years. If we're talking about the importance of behavioral understanding around managing the future brand and how they're experienced, but then also things are screenless. Is the internet, is it a platform to deliver data and information as well as some visual experience?
Currently, it is. I mean, you hit it on the kind of you hit the nail on the head there, where it's yeah, the internet's a web of pages, right? So rigid, static architectures that don't get to kind of move or change, right? So we're kind of pushing people through this rigid architecture. I think the main change for the future will be, why do you have to push people through something that's been predetermined? You don't, right? It's the mentality of, if you build a house and you're pushing everyone through the house, right? They all have to go through the same door. They can go up to the second floor or a different kind of room, but something has been built, and then we're essentially sending people through that rigid structure. For the future, I think it's more of a cultivation type mindset. It's almost like we're creating the garden, so to speak, right? So planting your seeds, defining the path through that, but then things will change. Think of like kind of weather or seasons, right? It'll adapt and change to that. So you're still kind of going through that, but it's adapting to what you need. An example of that could be, nothing is currently doing it now. So they are a competitor to Apple. They create beautiful mobile devices. They have an agentic app store, essentially, where you can create your own app. So, like, why do I actually need to go to Apple's app store? And if I've got an agentic operating system on my mobile device, or maybe my desktop, if we still have those, why can't it just be spinning up apps on the fly? So if I want to create a workout app because I'm going snowboarding in a few months'
Yeah.
time, great, they'll spin that up for you. And then when I don't need it, it goes away. It's that kind of same premise, I think, of like building these things, sending people to that destination to do something. If you think of your own personal agent, I think is probably where we will go. That can work at an operating system level across your devices, that is consistent. That can then spin up what you need as you go through, and it's relevant to you, understands your context, and then that agent can work on your behalf as well. So maybe that's kind of operating at a low level, finding you that Nike pair of sneakers when they drop to a good price, whatever you need it to do. So it becomes really interesting thinking about intent as well, the different levels around that. And then that agentic operating system, I think, will really help to actually understand your context more, because it's traveling with you rather than just being on a device. So I couldn't
Companionship.
tell you, yeah, a kind of consistent companion that can act on your behalf. So I can't tell you exactly where we're going, because I think no one knows, and it'll probably change in about 3 months once Anthropic drops Mythos or something like that. But that idea of, yeah, a consistent companion, and if we think about agentic like that, actually being able to operate your kind of digital life, I guess that could be really interesting. And yeah, it's just fascinating, kind of where we can go with all of that. But I think that, yeah, the main change, that going from like a builder mindset of rigid structures to something about cultivation. And throughout all of that, you can see just how increasingly important brand will become. So, like, how
Mm,
does my brand show up? That's the only thing that's actually going to make me seem different, what I stand for, who I am as a brand, um, because otherwise everything becomes the same.
yeah, just becomes formulaic and templated, and humans don't want that. Yeah, we want personality, don't we? And an
Yes.
interest, visual interest and experience. Yeah. Can you imagine then brands becoming almost like a subscription model? So if you have this companion that is saying, "Yeah, I'd like," you ask it to kind of build something that's relevant for your life that week. Um, but you could sort of say, I need this building, but imagine it's built by Nike or it's built by Apple or the whatever the brands that you follow, and maybe you sort of paid like a monthly subscription, to your favorite brands that feel part of your identity. Um, and so that, it would just be a completely different commercial model of branding.
Potentially, I think, I mean, a lot of brands already do like subscription type models. I think there would have to be a very fair value exchange for that to work. So if you're going to be subscribing, we've all got too many subscriptions already as it is. So there becomes a tipping point where you can't just keep subscribing to everything because the money we earn is finite at the moment.
Mm.
So the value becomes increasingly important. But maybe kind of in the future, the trend that we're seeing at RGA, I think with a lot of tech companies, especially, I mean, GitHub just changed to it. It's almost like rather than a subscription, which is a fixed cost that you pay, you're paying for your usage. So the number of tokens that you use. So you spoke about like Nike has created an app for me or something like that. And maybe it's more around kind of usage, right? So like if I'm a
Yeah.
power and I'm kind of using it more and that's burning
Yeah.
tokens, I would pay more, right? Which is a similar kind of approach to what we've got today with like electricity and things like that, which is basically what you're paying for, right? You're paying for
It
compute.
becomes a service. Compute basically becomes a service like electricity or, yeah,
Yeah.
water. I-
Which again has challenges and issues because then if everything is heading towards this agentic future and everything is burning electricity and consuming water and becoming increasingly expensive, like we have these amazing tools, but then we have to pay more for them. Um, but I think, yeah, I'm not quite sure the pricing we have for AI is quite realistic at the moment for what we're paying and what we're getting in return. So I think there's going to be an adjustment there.
Well, should we sort of introduce the G42 project then? So sort of feel like that's one of the first ideas that I've seen. Maybe you could introduce the project. What was the original brief?
G42 came to us. So G42 is an AI infrastructure company. They're based out in Abu Dhabi, everything from creating data centers to putting satellites in the sky and pipes in the ground. So huge infrastructure company. And they came to us with probably one of the best briefs that I've seen in a long, long time. And that brief was websites are dead, agencies are interchangeable or obsolete, prove us wrong. So when you get
Okay.
a brief like that, you're kind of like, okay, this is very interesting. This is clearly a client that has thought ahead and wants to do something different. And we obviously accepted that brief. We had a short pitch period with that where we kind of went back and we wanted, they believed with our point of view and our kind of thinking around that.
Mhm.
But we suggested a generative interface for them, which is essentially the bridge between an LLM and the lived experience. So if you think of the experience you have in an LLM, it's constantly adapting to needs. It's natural language conversation. It's giving you everything you need um, based on your intent. And if you think of a website, it's the opposite of that. You have fixed rigid structures that you get pushed through. So we created a generative interface for them. So it's not just a collection of pages, it's an adaptive experience that essentially orchestrates content in real time. And what that means is if I'm having a conversation and a dialogue with G42 and I get a response back, that could be a piece of content, I can then start to influence that. So maybe I don't like to read. I can go, can you give me a summary of that to get shorter content? Or maybe I want something more immersive because I'm a journalist and I want that for my article that I'm creating. Or maybe I hate looking at things and I want to listen to a podcast. We can turn it into that. So you can see how that interface becomes generative and really engages with the user kind of across the site. And it starts to remember who you are. So it has a sense of memory. So it understands that. It can understand the way that you communicate with the LLM as well. So infer whether you are, in a hurry because you're speaking in short, concise sentences, inferring the tone that you have. from that, it can start to tell whether maybe you're more technical, so they can start to kind of play back based off that, or maybe you're speaking in a slightly different manner. It can change its approach there, so that becomes really interesting. The brand character, we kind of touched on this before, that really starts to come to life as well. So we took the G42 brand, codified that, iterated on that, so that when you speak to the brand, it'd be called the LLM Marvin in this case, because G42 is all based on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because 42 is the answer to life. So you've got Marvin in there, so you can tell that personality already starts to kind of come to life.
Hey there, Marvin here. Think of me as your G42 guide with a sense of humor.
And then, of course, we defined the principles around that as well. So we had to spend a fair amount of time as well working with G42, just ensuring that what it was serving back up was right for the brand. And quite often that comes down to the fact that we're not thinking about like a CMS anymore. You're essentially thinking about knowledge. So uploading everything that we need to know about G42 as knowledge, and then Marvin, the LLM, looks at that knowledge to put it together to essentially give you the answer that you need. So sometimes you find that the answers you get were saying some things that the client didn't quite agree with because it's in
Yes.
the, so you have to go back and ensure that you've got the right knowledge and your data is correct to then get to
The guardrails on. Yeah.
God. Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, this sounds like a brand companion, like realized. It can generate content and stories, or it can generate anything that you ask it to do. So the website, it's not really a website. The browser is just a window into this virtual brand companion.
Ever wonder how it all started? Let's peek behind the curtain at G42. Ready to dive in? I can serve up the highlights whenever you're ready.
Have you got data on terms of who's looking at it, agents, humans? What's the kind of feedback so far?
It was launched, well, we announced it at GITEX, which was last year, I think in November or something like that, maybe September. We launched the alpha, and it was this year in February, if I'm not mistaken. So far, it's been very positive response. So a lot of people kind of engaging with it. Of course, there's been some challenges, along the way because it doesn't quite behave like a normal site because it's not. But from the client side, very positive response. We've shown it at Davos as well, so it's kind of on the forum there. So it's definitely getting a positive response. A lot of people are engaging with it, and I think, like you were saying, it's this is the first, well, kind of like the alpha state, I guess, of G42, right? So currently, it's that bridge between like the LLM and the web, where you can have that get that generative interface kind of giving you back what you need. The next step for G42 will be something that's much more agentic, where you can think about Marvin as the agent, but now agents can essentially, borderline think, and if you allow them to, they can act on your behalf. So actually, the agent then can start to move away from the website, right? And that can start to become something that you can take with you. And I think that's where we're going next with G42. We need to still, work through all of this, but the idea of the agent being able to move beyond screen, kind of beyond the browser, so to speak, becomes really interesting.
Wow. Okay. So that's then linking back to the screenless hardware, that we discussed. So it basically it can appear in different places. It's almost like a headless structure where the content is managed centrally and then it's fed, published to different platforms, channels. You see that with Agentic and G42. It just, yeah, it pops up wherever you are and wherever you need it.
I think that's the next place we need to go to with that. It's thinking more about, yeah, those agents as companions for you that can then help to act on your behalf. Um, I mean, you were at South by Southwest, right? I'm not sure if you saw kind of talk that we had there, and it was like, can brands actually, think now? Which becomes another interesting question. So if your brand, your logic has been codified, that's kind of guiding how you show up through these experiences, your brand can then almost start to think on your behalf or act on your behalf, which becomes fascinating. And I think agents will become increasingly common and powerful, and that becomes a really interesting, I think, frontier that we're heading into. Going through those rigid templates and experiences, you have an agent that goes out there for you and acts on your behalf, which is really interesting.
So you're very excited about this. Are there some reservations as well about where things could go?
Yeah, there's always reservations. Technology doesn't stop for anyone. At least I haven't seen it stop in my lifetime. It's the same kind of thing with like the internet, right? And mobile. When that took off, it kind of starts off and then there's an S curve and it goes up. I think we're probably at the base of like that next evolution, that next S curve. So I don't think AI is going anywhere. It's just going to increase. But the reservations would be around, just because you can create something, does that mean that you should, right? Just because something can now be super polished and look borderline perfect, should it, right? So I think we need to think before we make, and clear with the reasons why you're doing something. AI is definitely democratized design, I think. Like our parents could easily, create something that could look amazing. But there's a trap in that as well, where it looks great the first time you see it. You go down a level or two and you're like, why is it like this? This makes no sense. It looks perfect, but it's style over substance. So that increasingly, I think, is where taste becomes increasingly important, especially as a designer, right? You have all these amazing tools, but it's the taste that you have, it's the hard won learnings, the skills, the craft that we've all been through that then allow us to know what's good, what's not, where we should say no, why we should do something. So yeah, there are definitely kind of reservations there. With any new technology, there are positive impacts and negative impacts. Hopefully, we're going to see a space where the positive impacts of AI will outweigh the negative and unlock new opportunities, new roles, new ways of living. But that's still to be seen. If you think of the Japanese art of kintsugi, when something is broken, it gets put back together again with gold. You almost celebrate the history, right, of that object or the life that it's had. The fact that it was broken becomes something that becomes more valuable. So you actually celebrate the kind of cracks. And I think that's the human side we need to keep in mind, right? Like the lived experiences that I have are very different to yours, right? But that's why my opinion is different to yours, because my life's been different. And I think the differences that we have, that's what we need to dig down on, right? And celebrate those, bring those through into design. And if you think of that LLM analogy, we almost need to treat ourselves like an LLM. So your inputs, your references will be very different to mine, right? You might be going to different art galleries, or I'm going completely different, or merging Japanese calligraphy with a barbecue cooking course or something like that, and then you connect the dots and you've got a different idea. So I think we need to protect what we train ourselves on and not be stuck in the kind of doom scrolling algorithms and just feeding off the same stuff that's out there. You've actually got to fight now to find like what is different, what is unique, and embrace those human flaws, because that's what makes us, I think, unique and special.
I couldn't agree more. I think celebrate the weirdness, and celebrate the unknown. Fascinating. Rob, I'd love to talk to you again in like 6 months and see where this is going. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you, Alex. It was great to chat. Yeah, let's see where we're at in 6 months. I'm sure it'll be completely different. Thank you. Bye.